Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, Demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and there is a faint pulse in our 2020 season, but we're not out of the woods yet. We still have to beat the Bombers convincingly this week, and then wait nervously while our fate is decided by others. Joining me tonight is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy, and I'm practicing the words of the Fremantle Football Club song for the match on Sunday, in anticipation that they might do the job for us.
Might want to learn the Giants theme as well there, I think. Also joining us tonight, long-time caller to the show, Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Demonlanders, George and Andy. And yes, I think I might even practice the Suns theme song, although I can't even think of what it is off the top of my head. But,
I don't know the Suns, I don't know the Giants, and I just sort of know Freo, but that's about it.
And my movie quote this week, Andy, is, so you're telling me there's a chance, Andy. You're telling me there's a chance.
Yes. Well, there is a chance, but you know what? We'll go into it a bit later on, but I don't like having to rely on other teams. I'll take it if it comes our way, but I don't like that we're in this situation. I like to have our fate in our own hands, which it still is a tiny bit, one part of it, but the other part is not, and it's not even like there are teams that we can reliably rely on. So we'll talk about our run home and all the permutations that get us into the finals a bit later on. But first, we love hearing from Demonlanders, so if you'd like to join the program tonight to discuss any of the topics that we talk about, you can give us a call on 03 9016 3666 or Skype us at Demonland31. If you're listening to the show live, you can join us in our chat room where you can ask questions or post comments by heading over to demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening to this show at your leisure via SoundCloud on demonland.com or via an Apple or Android podcasting apps, be sure to subscribe to the podcast to receive updates when a new show drops. Don't forget to leave us a favourable review to help more people find us. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher, so you can get the show that way too. Just head over to demonland.com to find the links to your preferred listening method. You can follow us on social media on Facebook at facebook.com/demonland31, on Twitter at Demonland, on Instagram at Demonland31, or on YouTube just search for Demonland Podcast and listen to some of the interviews that we've conducted with current and past players and coaches. Or if you just love talking about the D's 24/7 all year round, why not join up to demonland.com and chat with other D's fans about this once great club. Really should change that, because this week I'm actually happy about the D's, and it was as a result of our win on the weekend. Boys, it's a much better feeling winning than losing. B-Man, how was your mood on the weekend after the game?
Oh, yeah, I was well and truly up. I had dinner with the family before the game, and my son and daughter are both sort of vaguely Melbourne fans, but have never embraced it with any passion, I have to say. And my son said to me before the game, why do I barrack for Melbourne? And I misinterpreted what he said to, suggesting that maybe I should swap teams. I said, you can't do that. That's just not on. That's just you're not allowed to. He said, no, I don't mean that. But why do you follow them with such passion? I mean, and I didn't really have a ready answer for him. Although if he'd come in with about 2 minutes to go after Rivers put that wobbly kick through on his left foot, and me screaming at the television, he might have had some idea of the passion. So, yeah, I was well up and about after that. And, fantastic win, wasn't it?
It was, George. Your weekends are always better after a win.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, Andy. The dog's much happier. There's less screaming at the television, and she can go to the other end of the house and sit down there quietly. I'm very fortunate my wife doesn't care anything about football, so she's happy to be down the other end of the house as well. But the weekend's always much better when the teams win. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because this year, every game we've had to watch from home, and the room that I watch in is my daughter's bedroom is right next to it, and I don't know how she slept through because most of our games have been night games. I really don't know how she slept through some of the screaming and shouting and carrying on that I've done during games. I must say, after the game, my heart was just absolutely racing. I remember, if you remember earlier on in the year, I had my watch alert me to a very high heart rate. I didn't quite get that alert this week, but I went into my wife and I said, "Feel my heart." It was just absolutely racing, and because when Melbourne's in that situation, I often just assume we're gonna we're going to lose, and it was great to get the win out of it. But yeah, my heart got a good working out this week. Well, let's talk about some individual efforts from some players. And first off, my absolute favourite player at the moment. My favourite player was Maxi. It probably still is, but Stephen May is every single week he's getting closer and closer to taking that off Maxi. What a huge game from May. He's just a solid brick wall in defence. Track has had a stellar year and will probably win the best and fairest, but boy, does Stephen May deserve it. He's been phenomenal in defence this year. Even the games where we've lost, he's been a rock. He deserves recognition this year. I really want him in the conversation for All-Australian. Harris Andrews probably gets it. We've talked about that. The media's in love with Brisbane. But I want some love bestowed upon May. I really hope at the very least he gets in the All-Australian squad. Big man, Stephen May, you got love for him too?
Total man love, as they say. The thing I've loved about him for pretty much all season, but particularly in the last 4 or 5 weeks, is his leadership. And we've been crying out for it at different times at the footy club. And his leadership in this game as well. He was not only, as you said, resolute down there. He's like a wall, and he was picking those marks off. He's really clunking those one-on-one marks as well. Again, that you'd be frustrated if you're an opposition fan of them continually kicking it to him at the contest and him marking it. And when that happens to us, I often think, in previous years, that's what I want, is a player back there who can just take those repelling marks. But just his body language, his general sort of will to want to win. And I thought there were terrific comments by Rivers after the game about May's been in his ear all season about defending more strongly. And I just loved him, his whole attitude, and he's a real Melbourne man now, isn't he?
Absolutely, George. 7 intercept marks, 7 intercepts, 4 intercepts marks. I think he's had 8 marks in total. I'm pretty sure the 467 metres gained, which was the highest for the D's, is probably as a result of him kicking out. But he had a huge last quarter. You must also have a bit of a man crush on Stephen May.
That's exactly the word. Took him right out of my mouth there. He's been everything that we've ever wanted as in a fullback, and sort of as general of the back line as well. The other thing I particularly like about him is not only just the way he marshals all the players around them getting in the right position, but he knows when to go and when to stop, when to mark it and when to punch. And he's just so reliable now. Some people might complain about the kick-outs always going to the same area down the wing, but you don't get those critical turnovers that other players in the back line are unfortunately doing every now and again. Stephen May's just every week it's the same. You get just reliability, assurity, and boy, could we have used him a couple of years ago? But we've got him now, and hopefully he'll be around for quite a while.
A few weeks ago, George, you mentioned that you sort of had noticed a bit that if he started off kicking all right in that first quarter, he generally kicked well for the match. And there was a couple of turnovers in this game where he missed targets, but on the whole, his kicking was excellent. And there was one where he kicked to the centre corridor, which didn't hesitate on it. And he's got a really neat kicking action. But the thing that I really like about his kicking is his depth. off one step, he can clear 50 to 60 metres pretty easily. And that's super important when it becomes more than a bailout kick then, because even if it does, go to a contest down the line, that's a down the line contest 60 metres from goal. And I think that's in a territory game. It's super important.
Absolutely. Next one, I want to talk about quite a few of our young guys. I thought they were really important on the weekend. Trent Rivers talked this kid up last week as being my only positive on a dark night, and it's early day. I want to lock this kid away. It's early days. I don't want to put the pressure on him, but he really has 300 games and leadership written all over him in his future. 2 goals, the match winner, the winning fist away at the end. George, your thoughts on Rivers and maybe what you think his role is going to sort of evolve into?
Yeah, he's a real ripper, isn't he? He's come into the side in his first season and basically locked that position down at sort of the half-pack flank area. It's a nice match now that we've got with Salem on one side and him on the other. 2 reliable kicks, which is what we've been missing again for a long time. And his willingness just to go at the ball when needed. Everybody would have seen the replays of that last 2 minutes. And after the Rivers goal, he's then gone into it again and basically twice in the matter of probably 10 or 15 seconds stopped the GWS players moving the ball forward with a spoil that probably a first-year player wouldn't be entitled to consider getting to, but he got to it and stopped it. And then he had another tackle straight after that. He just doesn't stop. He keeps going. And his delivery is just fantastic. And he's got that natural footballer ability to read the play, particularly up the ground. So, yeah, he's been a great addition to the side as a whole. It's just one of the positives of what we got out of the draft last year, alongside Pickett and Luke Jackson as well. So the other thing that was interesting, I thought, between Rivers and Salem, they kicked a quarter of the team's goals this week. So in the absence of the forwards doing the job, the halfbackers are filling in. I hope the forwards do a little bit better next week and don't rely on those sort of returns.
B-Man, you want to add anything about Rivers?
Just a couple of things. He's last week there was some comments on Demonland that there were some concerns. He was sitting by himself, and Lever and May were sitting across the room, and it was, I thought that was straight after the game, so I'll excuse the comments really. But who knows what had happened prior to that. But what I actually took from that footage was how upset he was at the loss. And I thought to myself at the time, that's a kid who, like May, hates losing. And that's the way he played that game this week. He played like a player who hates losing and was going to do whatever he could to make sure that he played his part in ensuring that we didn't lose. And all year when he's been in, I've loved his confidence with his kicks. Even after he's made some mistakes, he's still been aggressive with his kicks, particularly ones taking on that corridor kick. It's been super impressive. I went to that practice game we played, it seems like another century ago, at Arden Street in the pre-season. And he was really impressive in that game, taking on those aggressive kicks as well. And, I loved after he got that set shot from the free kick from Mumford, how he had both hands in the air and, his fingers in the air. And, in that last 30 seconds, not only did he spoil, but right near the end, the ball kicked loose from that spoil, and they picked it up, and he threw himself at the contest, which spilled the ball again when Track came through and got that sort of second to last disposal off to Langdon. But it was just sheer desperation, and that's what you want from every single player on the team. And for it to be a first-year player in his 6th game of AFL footy, you can't manufacture that sort of will to win, can you?
Yeah, there's no fear at all with him. He'll throw himself into a contest, and that's what I love about him. Next one I want to talk about, Charlie Spargo. I was impressed with Charlie's game. He didn't have huge stats, but it's the type of footy that I want to see from him. Pressure, running into space to provide a link across half forward. He's kicked 2 goals. I was happy with his game. Sort of he's had that cameo against Collingwood, and he sort of hasn't done much else. But I was much happier with this game from him, George.
Yeah, have to agree with that. It was interesting. I looked through again a few of the stats. He had about the same on-ground time as Neil Bullen and Hunt, and I think there was a chalk and cheese difference between the outputs between the three of them. Spargo had 13 disposals, Neil Bullen 9, Hunt 5. But Spargo also had 5 marks and 2 tackles, which was much more than the other two combined as well. So he's the man we want in that small forward position. It seems he's prepared to put in, and he's topped it off with a couple of goals. So he's doing a great job, and I think he's got the job for. It's his for the taking up forward, because I don't think we've got very much else in the way of competition up there, unfortunately, at the moment.
Just with Spargo, Andy, that he's running up the ground is super impressive. He really pushes up hard up the to help out at the defensive end, and his tackling has been really strong. I really like his around the ground field kicking as well. He's a really neat kick, but you just can't underestimate how important. Obviously, the 2 goals he kicked were, but they were both goals that you need to get. That sort of, as we talked about a few weeks ago, they're the ones that if you miss, it has such a deflating effect on the team. And he went back and slotted the first one after a beautiful bit of transition footy, balanced up, and pretty much from the same spot. His second shot was, it must have been right on his range, and he made the distance all right. He just got it over the top of Mumford, but I had to laugh with his reaction. He's had a wry grin on his face afterwards. It was a pretty
Like
muted.
he wasn't sure whether he was like he wasn't
Well,
sure he was
no,
going to.
I'm not sure, but he certainly didn't celebrate like someone who was kicking a clutch goal, and all power to him.
Well, since we brought up a couple of players, Nibbler and Hunt, I thought Hunt just did 2 things in the game. There was one which I'll talk about when I talk about Cozzy Picker, where he ran the length of the ground, and he's kicked a goal as well. But other than that, he was barely sighted, and Neil Bullen as well just seems to run around, but really isn't adding anything. I mean, if you're only going to get a handful of possessions, you maybe got to impact the scoreboard or something like that. Where are we with those 2 guys in particular? George, might start with you.
I'm not a fan of Neil Bullen at all. He's been running around for 2 years now. People always say he puts a lot of pressure on, but that was in 2018. He doesn't get to the man. He doesn't put the pressure on. He's not in their face because he doesn't get close enough anymore. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the necessary skills when the pressure really comes on. He's not a great user of the football. He always seems to be around when somebody else kicks the goal. He's always first in to be able to high-five someone. But no, he doesn't add the value that's needed up forward. And unfortunately, the question is who else do we put in there at the moment? It's difficult to see any others coming through. Pickett's obviously got the other side sewn up pretty well, but I don't know that A and B adds all that much to us, either around the ground or up forward. And when you've got the same amount of time and the limited amount of time on the field, you've got to do everything at 110%. In order to impact the game, and he's just not doing that at the moment. And unfortunately, Hunt's in the same boat. I think that he's just not. Apart from that one passage of play, I didn't notice him at all. And what was really telling, I think, in terms of we'll talk about it later, was in that last 2 minutes, the coaches on the boundary line trying to get players to get into the right positions. One of whom was Hunt, and you say it should have been a natural footballer's first thoughts to get to the back of the pack. You don't need to be sitting in the forward line when we're 5 points up. We need to be stopping them from scoring in those sort of circumstances. And I don't know that the coach needs to be telling players like that to do exactly what he was telling them to do.
Big man.
Yeah, look, I mean, A and B is an interesting one because, again, as we've talked about any number of times, really, is without being able to see how much running they do, his ability to run and cover and defend and be part of that all-team defensive run, I think, is probably pretty important. Perhaps Hunt as well. I'm more worried about Hunt really than A and B. I see all the knocks on A and B, and don't disagree with anything you said, George. But I do wonder whether that running is a really key factor in terms of keeping him in the side. The ability to get across, you just don't see it. Although interestingly, on the TV coverage, there are a few more down the ground shots, but nonetheless, you don't really see the impact. Though in games we do lose and he plays for, I don't know what it is, but he's sort of constant opening his mouth like a goldfish starts to, I'd drop him just for that, I reckon. But
He's allowed to breathe.
I'll fully admit that's my issue, not his. But Hunt's a different, kettle of fish, and I mean he just doesn't get enough impact on the game. And that was a nice snap he kicked, so that was an important goal. I think up forward really is his only position because there's not really space in the game now for that player who sort of runs off into space because there's no space to run into with the teams getting back and setting up their zones, and his field kicking is just not strong enough. So it's a liability, but I just wish, I do like him as a player. He just doesn't get enough football. So, you can't really be getting 5-6 possessions a game and remaining in the team.
One guy who we've only really seen glimpses of up until now is Oscar Baker. He showed some really good signs in this match, 2 great snaps from both sides of the body. I'd really like to see more of him in 2021. Hopefully he gets a good run with injury and can do a full preseason, because I don't think up until now, George, I don't think he's had a full preseason. You're down at a lot of preseason trainings. I would love to give him a few games in a row. Obviously, might only have the one more this year, but going into next year, love to see him get a few games in a row to get settled and show us what he's got, rather than in and out. Really like to see more of him, George.
Yeah, totally agree. He's had a horrible run with injuries, and he might be one of those players who takes a couple of years to get his body right to be able to play AFL football, and hopefully that's happened now. But this was an impressive game from a kid who's been on the sidelines for a long, long time. Again, with the stats, he had 334 metres gained, which was the 4th best for the side for the game. A couple of goals. More importantly, I think him being on the wing enabled Tomlinson to slide back into the defence to help out with the work that was being done on Cameron as well. So he's released the pressure on the wing. Instead of Tomlinson having to work up the ground, he can now slot into that back line, and on his own, he's running solidly. He looks like he's got the body now that's going to last in at the AFL pressure levels. So he might be another one that in 2020, this season, we've discovered someone who's going to be around for quite a while. Let's hope that's the case, and hope he avoids the injuries like he's unfortunately run into in the past.
A few things about Oscar is that I thought it was a terrific game, and to be honest, I didn't think he really was going to be an AFL player, and one game probably doesn't sort of necessarily prove the case that he is, but it was super impressive. And speaking of taking his chances, both of those goals he kicked were critical. The first one to get us going, to take advantage of a mistake. They're the ones that they're worth their weight in gold, those sorts of goals out of nothing. And then the second one, I think that was on his left foot. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that was on his opposite foot, and it was pretty sure it was another clutch goal. And it made me think. I really hope he makes it, but it really reminded me of the importance of someone on the opposite wing to Langdon with pace and who can get forward. Getting the sort of metres gain that he did. That's such a critical role now in footy, and he played it. He was fantastic. He faded a bit in the second half, I thought, but he in that first half he was arguably our most important player offensively. And it's great to see a fella with a big red mustache and sort of a red mullet running down the wing. I look forward to seeing him at the MCG.
Yeah, I liked what one of the commentators said, that he looks like he could have played for Fitzroy in the 80s. I thought that was a good one. I like, George, what you said about allowing Tomlinson to go back, which is good, because then it doesn't expose us on the wing. So if he can nail down the opposite wing to Langdon, I think that's going to be fantastic for us. Lazy in the chat room, before we go on, and I didn't have this guy in my notes, but perhaps we can just quickly talk about it, said, what did we think of Nev's game? Does he still have enough to offer? George, you want to take that one?
Very sadly, I'll take this one. Unfortunately, I think it's over for Nev. He's still contracted for another year, but whether he chooses to continue, I'm not sure. I think he's reached that point that we've seen a lot of players, because we've all watched a lot of football, where the mind is still willing, but the body isn't anymore. He just can't get to those contests that were so critical in the development of his reputation, from 2 years ago, certainly. As you get older, the body ages and you start to get the injuries, and that's exactly what happened to him in this game. So sadly, I don't think. I think it was one thing that was critical to me was in that goal that Daniels kicked, that miraculous goal that he kicked from the boundary line, where Nev just couldn't quite get enough speed to get to that. Sadly, Nev actually went past Smith doing the same thing, but Tomlinson came in at the very last moment to try and stop it. But as far as Nev was concerned, he just couldn't get it. You could see he was trying to will the body to do it, and the legs just weren't responding in the same way that they used to. So, yeah, sadly, I think we might see Nev take up the retirement option. But like I said, he's still got another year on the contract. Terrible to lose those sort of willing, capable players, but I think the writing's well and truly on the wall.
Yeah, I mean, he's just lost the speed. As simple as that, hasn't he? I mean, that one was a dog's breakfast, that goal, because I thought Smith gave up running.
He did as well.
Smith
Yeah,
got to that and passed
Yeah.
Jetta. Maybe he thought, well, Jetta's in front of me. But he was running up and down on the spot. I mean, having said all that, that contest in the last quarter was critical, wasn't it? He put his body on the line. He beelined it, created a spill from that contest, and you got to love Jets, just the way he puts his body on the line week in, week out. But you also got to worry that he'll get seriously hurt. And another year on the contract, I can't see him playing much. I can't see him playing any more senior football, to be honest, unfortunately, just because you're right, George. He hasn't got the pace, and but I'd love to see him stay at the club. If hopefully we'll be playing VFL games next year, and if he's not playing, I hope they move heaven and earth to get him keep him at the club in a welfare role. And he's such a solid citizen that you just don't let that sort of person leave your footy club if you can help it.
100%. They've got to try and retain him any way they can, whether it's in a leadership role, as in leaders of the players, something welfare. They've got to keep him around the club in a coaching role, which might be difficult given the financial situations clubs are going to be under in the next few years. But I would love it if he could stick around. Next one,
it was a
Cosy
curious
Pickett.
decision to bring him in, I thought, Andy, because as I've said last week, our biggest Achilles heel defensively is those small and medium players. They're the ones who kick the goals week in, week out. The bigs, we've got the bigs covered. That's not an issue for us. When's the last time a true big got hold of us. It's the players like Daniels who hurt us. I mean, I was amazed Toby Green didn't have more of an impact actually, and perhaps they thought Daniels isn't that quick and he's strong, and Jets would be able to go with him. But he was Jets' man for most of the game, and he kicked three, could have kicked a fourth that would have put them ahead. And yeah, I was a bit surprised. I'm not sure what the deal with Lockhart is, but I was a bit surprised Nav did come in.
I will say, when you're talking about selections, I still don't know what Lockhart has done that he can't get into the team, because I would have thought he would be the perfect player to play on those smaller guys. He's not. We'll talk about later, McDonald, Tip and Woody we've got coming up. I don't know. That's something we'll talk about a bit later. Let's go on. Cozzy Pickett, with the exception of his inaccuracy in front of goals, I really love the spark he brings to the game, but he's really got to start putting on that scoreboard pressure. And I think that will come, and he will break games apart. But 1 goal, 3, and it could have easily been 3 or 4 goals. It's just got to put that scoreboard pressure on. It's the one thing for him having that breakout game, and he's almost there, but not quite. One piece of play that I will highlight from Cozzy that perfectly sums up how hard he works is that goal that he kicked. He got a contested possession in the back 50. He handballed it off to Hunter, who cleared the ball hurriedly off the ground into the middle. GWS got the ball, and the guy was tackled by Track. We got the free and advantage through Weed, and Track ran towards our 50 and received the ball on half forward. Track kicks the ball to advantage. It sits well for Hart just outside the goal square to tap it down to Pickett, who's run in for an easy goal. And both Pickett and Hunt have run from deep into fence to the top of the square within less than a space of 20 seconds, or just on 20 seconds. It was just incredible and great bit of gut running, and I really, really love that. You love seeing that.
There was another example in the game as well. I don't know whether you picked up on it, but it was the goal that ultimately Spargo kicked, I think, from inside the goal square. That started from Cozzy down the back line. I think he caused the first turnover, and again it was the same story. He ran from the goal square in the back line to actually, I think he was the one who passed it off to Spargo in the goal square.
Yeah.
So again, he'd run the whole length of the ground, was involved in the middle on the way through, and then followed it up at the end. That's running that's just elite. If he starts, sometimes you want to let them have their head, but sometimes you sort of say maybe it's just slow down just a little bit and make sure that you nail those ones in front of goal, which seems so easy because you put yourself in such a great position. But look, he's going to do that one day. He's going to kick 5 or 6, and people are going to be going, where did this guy come from? At the moment, he's contributing in more than just kicking goals, because he's given plenty of opportunities to others around him and bringing them into the game. He's a first-class player, and hopefully the injuries don't hit him badly when people start to target him, because they know how dangerous he can be.
And he's fierce at the ball. Just hope he doesn't get a reputation with umpires for being, too fierce, because he tackles like like he's really wants to tackle hard for a little fella. We saw his clip from his recruiting, the hit that he put on in that Shepherd. He's taken that across to AFL level. On his goal kicking, I think for me, there's a combination of he gets a bit of a rush. He sort of needs to balance up a bit on those snaps, but there's a few where I'd love him to take a snap and he gives it off. I think for the small forwards, they've got to have a certain amount of license. For if you're inside 30, you take your shot at goal. And he just on that goal, you're right. That was a fantastic bit of running, and he didn't look super stuffed afterwards. That was impressive fitness, but that was really curious because I don't think the umpire called advantage, and Wiedemann took the ball, and I'm pretty sure the umpire didn't call advantage.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the umpire thought it was Wiedemann's free kick. And an almost identical thing happened when I noticed it at the time live in the game, and I watched the replay yesterday, and almost exactly the same thing happened where I forget who actually got the free kick, but Brown picked the
Brown.
ball up, and
Sean Smith's.
it was
Yep.
who? Sorry.
Yes, Smith got the free and Brown took the kick.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the same thing. Advantage wasn't called. I think both times it was a flat out mistake, and that the one that Track got across, that should have been called back. Track should have gone back, and we wouldn't have got the goal because we wouldn't have had the extra overlap player. If I was a GWS fan, and I would be fuming, absolutely fuming, because that was just a straight out error, I think.
Especially when Wiedemann put his hands up to indicate we're not going to take the advantage.
Yeah, that's right. And Track ended up being the one who got it over the top. So
Yeah.
And it was really great by Track. As soon as he tackled and heard the whistle, he just ran away and left it for Wiedemann, like he knew that Wiedemann was going to be allowed to take the kick. I don't know what was going through Track's mind, because usually when you get that free kick, you'll go to take your ball. I don't know what went through his mind, but it actually worked out well for us. And as you said, if we'd gone back, we wouldn't have, because it wasn't just Hunt and Pickett there. Spargo was there as well. And the GWS guy actually had to leave Spargo to go to try and get Hunt. And you had to choose between, whether to stay with Spargo or go to Hunt or go mind Cozzy. But, if he goes to mind Cozzy, then Hunt takes it out of the air and kicks the goal, or, it happens what happened when you catch that. So
it was a flat out mistake, but it's funny how the difference which team you barrack for makes, because we're having a good old laugh about it, and that's a curiosity. But if that had happened to Melbourne and we'd lost the game by 5 points,
filthy.
my Sunday would have been completely different, and this podcast would be somewhat different in mood, I think.
Well, let's talk about this now, because George, you put into the show notes tonight, you wanted to talk about the umpiring. I thought we actually, I'm always filthy on frees that we don't get. No stat for that, so but there were a few that happened. But then again, you look at those things, that thing that happened with Brown, the thing that happened with Track and Weed. Melksham threw the ball twice. One of the times was the most obvious of throws I've ever seen. It was almost a rugby pass back. So they've missed those for us. I'm sure there are other ones that I'm just not thinking of now, but there were a couple. I didn't think the Mumford one on Rivers necessarily was a free. It was quite accidental, so maybe even obviously accidental stuff is still free kicks, but yeah, I would have been maybe filthy at something like that too. So George, you go ahead. What was your problem with the umpires this week?
I think you highlighted all the individual things, but collectively
they benefited us.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
We don't get angry when they benefit us.
I get disappointed when I see it, because it's the same old stuff every week. The umpires, and in this game it was always umpire Williamson. They just don't watch what's going on around the ground. You'd think that they'd actually know who's got the free kick, especially after you've paid the free kick, as to who gets to kick the ball, but obviously not these ones. Throwing the ball against Melksham was an absolute eye opener. How that was not possibly picked up is incomprehensible to me. Once again, you remember Alistair Clarkson came out complaining about 46 tackles that his team had in a game and not a single holding the ball decision made. Well, in this game, the commentators at halftime between the two teams noticed that once again there were 40 tackles between the two teams, so 20 for each roughly, and again, not a single holding the ball decision made up to halftime. The umpires have gone backwards. They've gone back to what was critical in the first half of the season. You've got to make decisions when there are decisions to be made. This easy out, don't make any decision, call play on, has just led to scrums being formed. We'll be complaining about the number of players around the ball and the number of ball ups very soon because they've reverted to what was the problem in the first place. It's just awful what we're seeing, and it's not just in our game. We were the beneficiaries in this game. We would have been, as you said, we would have been ropeable if those decisions had gone against us. But it's the quality that you really need to complain about.
It's not up to the standard it needs to be, and I'm not sure they would have had problems this year. I'm guessing with the quarantine and the hubs and all of those things. There were some shocking non-decisions in this game. There were a few that we didn't get, to be honest, where manhandled in the ruck. A number of times where they sort of raffle that kick against Gawn. That ridiculous situation where the two ruckmen are wrapping each other's, in a big bear hug, both of them, and they pick out a free kick. There was a number of others high. I thought Spargo clearly was taken high. There was, pushes in the back not paid. Any number of holding the ball decisions not paid, and it's not just in this game. It seems to be. I was watching the first half of the Suns game, which I don't know the result of, Andy. So don't tell me. The same deal. So it's an issue. It was an issue before this season, and it's been worse than I can ever recall it. And because I'm not at the ground, and so you see it sort of a bit differently, I guess, on the television. Though the commentators aren't, noting half of the bad free kicks, they've just got to sort it out. And I mean, again, we've talked about this before, but I just think they may not be able to do it next year with the money situation, but at some point they've got to bite the bullet and pay pay for umpires to be professional umpires and hold them to a standard of professional umpiring, because it's and sort out the rules for that's not their fault if the rules are opaque. So it's just a blight on the game at the moment. And you just hate to see games decided by it, don't you? Or it being a factor. As I said, you would have justification if you're a GWS fan to be ropeable for that goal, given the time of it, the sort of what's on the line. So the umpiring has been really poor. And last week, because we were upset with the Freo game, and I thought the umpiring was appalling last week, and we got the rough end of the stick. I just didn't want to sort of bang on about it, but there were any number of decisions we could have got last week as well, and not that it would have made a difference, I guess, but it doesn't really matter. You never know what difference it would make, but that's not really the point, whether it changes the result of the game or not.
Yeah, there was one other thing which I think actually was critical to us, particularly in the second half, was at half time, Viney went to umpire Williamson and complained bitterly about what Mumford was doing around the ground and in the ruck. And as a result, in the second half, frees, including particularly that one again for Rivers, were start to being paid against him. So that was worthwhile. But you do have to ask why a player who wasn't the captain, incidentally, needs to go to the umpire to complain about what's going on the ground when it's obvious to everybody except these people who are calling themselves umpires. Again, it worked in our favour, but you shouldn't need to be doing that sort of thing. And I agree with Binman, you need to go professional with this. You can't have results, and there's an awful lot of money involved in these games and the amount of resources that are devoted to AFL football. And we've got part-time amateurs running around, supposedly holding the game together in some way. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Not when you think about the sort of confected controversy about the arc decisions, about the occasional touched over the line, or did it shave the post, or, and you have Jared Waitley banging on about, well, it's not fair on the competition, or it's not fair on Melbourne, and, give me a break. I mean, if the umpires make 10, 15 poor decisions a match, is a lot more impactful on whether there's an occasional one that's touched on the line or not touched on the line.
Look, I agree with what you say about umpires needing to become professional, but given the state of the financial state of the game, coaches and the like losing jobs, I can't see that happening. But something's got to change. You mentioned the commentators and Mumford, and I wasn't happy with the way the commentators were commentating about Mumford. It seemed like they were having a bit of a laugh about how physical he was being, and given things that have come out about head knocks and all that, I think the commentators need to start be getting serious, as well as the AFL, in how they adjudicate some of the head stuff. Max has got thumped in the back of the head by Mumford, and what's Mumford got? A $1,000 fine. If they were serious about head knocks and clashes to the head and intentional hitting, they're going to rub people out. Neil Bullen got rubbed out for a sling tackle where a player got injured, but look, Max didn't get injured, but sometimes those small head knocks add up on top of each other, and the AFL's just not consistent with how they want to sort of adjudicate the things that they want to stamp out of the game. And for the commentators to sort of laugh about it, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me.
Oh, could not agree more, and it just drives me insane. The whole commentary drives me insane, to be honest. It's it's dominated by meathead ex-footballers like Darcy, who there's a single incident that's vaguely reportable, their instinctive reaction is, there's nothing in that, and having a bit of a laugh. It's like watching that stupid video clip of the big hits from the 80s that they seem to love so much, those sorts of things. And I mean, they were joking about it when he hit Gawn in the back of the head, which was, I don't understand why that's not a report. I mean, because he was nowhere near the ball. And I think it was Darcy who said, "Oh, he was mummied." I mean, like that, that's not funny. It's like, it's just glorifying a big thug. It just drives me despair. I can't stand it. And the general standard of commentary is just infuriating. Particularly in the model that they've got, you've got Richardson and Darcy just talking to each other as if they're at the pub when the game's going on. Just call the football. I don't want to hear their opinion about Mumford, and that's a great way to play footy, and you know what you're going to get, and he's physical. That's not, it's just not what I want to hear. And I know you can turn it off, but then you don't hear the sounds of the game in the same way. It's just rubbish.
On the commentators, it's worthwhile remembering, and probably the standard is indicative of the way the AFL controls this whole game, is that who pays for the commentators. They're obviously not allowed to complain about the umpires, even though they look at it and go, occasionally they go, "Oh, that was a very unusual decision." The same about what you're talking about. These reportable incidents being passed off. The AFL doesn't want publicity about people hitting each other, and the AFL doesn't want negative publicity about their umpires, because otherwise they might have to do something about it. But we're not going to see anything until they really get serious about both.
Yeah, and Andy, while you've opened up that can of worms on the venting on television coverage, is their job is to cover the game of football. At a critical moment of the game, there was a really interesting thread today that someone started about camera angles and the way the game's covered. And they brought up the example of after Cozzy kicked that point from the boundary line after a terrific bit of play. Actually, the build up to that play was fantastic. He kicked a point, and then it went out of bounds immediately. And they were showing a replay of something that had happened 2 or 3 minutes prior with Viney that had nothing to do with what was happening in the game. That again, Darcy was making commentary about. And there was no footage of how that ball went out. And because they didn't have the footage on, they couldn't even show the replay of how the ball went out and it ended up in our forward pocket. I have no idea what happened. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think what the problem here is actually COVID. In a strange sense, I don't think Channel 7 or Foxtel have got the same number of cameras and cameramen, and I don't think they've got the same number of directors, or the directors are sitting in a room in South Melbourne or wherever the headquarters might be, and they're trying to move the camera shots from one to another without not actually being at the ground or being in close vicinity. They're not getting this. I don't think they're getting the same number of feeds as what they're used to. For example, and the end result is we're not seeing the stuff that we should be seeing. And quite often you've got to look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to actually watch the game that's going on. The priorities are all around the wrong way. We should be watching the game on the main screen and any replays on the corner. But
sometimes they don't even do that little picture box in the bottom with the live play on it. And so you're just showing a replay, but there's stuff going on. And it's like, get off this. I don't want to see this. I want to see what's happening. What I actually asked the question on this thread that you're talking about, Big Man, about where is the production normally done from? Like the directors and all that, are they usually at the ground or somewhere underneath the ground?
And at the ground, always at the ground.
Yeah, so now it's obviously done elsewhere, and the commentators are obviously commentating from a studio.
Yeah,
I'm sure they've got a couple of screens in front of you, but obviously more limited than camera positions available. Obviously, they're seeing more things than we're seeing because they probably have a couple of angles, but it does not make up from being able, and it's the same for us as supporters watching on TV. It doesn't make up from sitting up, up one level up and having a whole view of the whole ground. Someone mentioned that they've got the boundary riders there, but they're on the ground level. They don't really have a bird's eye view of seeing what's going on. So I think it makes it hard for the commentators as well, because they really can't see what's happening if the camera's not pointing at something, even though they might have a view of 3 or 4 cameras, and I doubt it's even that much. They don't know what else is going on around the ground. So that's probably why some of the commentary is so important.
Sorry, Andrew, the two things that I know for a fact, because there was that article that I posted on Demonland a few weeks ago about the TV coverage, that they have a constant stream of the down the ground shot. So the commentators do too, presumably, because they feed that into the coach's box. So up in the coach's box, they've got a feed of just the camera angle from behind the goals. So the commentators at any time could look at that screen. Presumably they've got it as well. It would make sense for the coaches to be able to have access to it, not the commentators. But the other thing is that, that's a reasonable point, that they're probably doing production from off-site. But that's a production decision about, surely the rule is you show live footage all the time, not a replay. There was one point where they were showing a replay on the main screen in the breakout box in the corner while the game was going on. They had footage of Goodwin talking to Fritsch on the boundary line. It was like, that's ridiculous. So it's, I can't wait to get back to live footy, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that, just even, we've discussed it in previous podcasts, is that we love being at the ground, love seeing what's happening not around the ball, where players are positioned, to see whether Nibbler, what he's doing, when we're not seeing him on the thing. It makes it difficult for us as well. Let's move on. Mitch Brown. I really like his work leading up the wings in providing that marking target. I think he's been more effective in this respect than T-Mac this year, and we've sort of acknowledged that perhaps T-Mac's carrying some injury that's preventing him from playing at his best. But I've got no idea why we decided to drop Mitch Brown for the Freo game to bring Bruce in, and I can understand if it was based on the conditions in Cairns, but not when the alternative was Bruce. Like if we had just dropped Mitch Brown because it was going to rain and bring in a smaller guy, but they didn't. They brought in Bruce, who we didn't even use as a relief ruckman, really. So we used him as a forward. I think Brown was stiff to get dropped the other week, but what I liked this week was his work up the ground to provide a target, and he often gets in front of his man and can take a mark. I like him. I know he's getting up there in age, but George, do you know what I think he was only contracted for a year. Well, if that's the case, would you keep him around for another?
That is correct. He runs out of contract at the end of this year, and I'd definitely keep him around for another, unless we can find an equivalent sort of younger player. Someone of the likes of, say, there's Jackson, but unless you can get a Brody Myercheck perhaps in, who has got a similar sort of body. We need some reliability. Binman was talking particularly last week about the need to have reliability in the team, not just chopping and changing every week. And a player like Mitch Brown is never going to come out and kick 5 or 6 goals for you, but he will kick 1 and 2 every week, and he'll provide that lead up the ground, and he'll take that mark in the goal square that you desperately need occasionally. He's a serviceable player, and I don't think we're getting what we need out of Wiedemann. And T-Mac, there's still big questions about his injuries and endurance, whether he'll be capable of getting on the ground in any sort of regular basis. But I'd be leaving Mitch Brown in the side and keep him around, because even if we just stay with who we've got, we need someone like that bigger body for the development of the younger players. You don't want to be going to next year with, say, Jackson and Wiedemann as your sole big forwards. You need something else as the season goes on.
Yeah, he was terrific in this game. I thought it was 17 possessions, was it? Something like that. But really, the most impressive part of his game was his mobility. And in fact, I think Cameron made a bit of an error allowing him to push so far up the ground and not running someone with him more often, because he, in that last quarter, he got a lot of important outlet kicks from the back half, and where he was the first player in the sort of chain, or the one that they crossed to. And that was super important, and I was surprised that they didn't ban him up more often. But he's also a really reliable field kick. I don't recall him turning it over once from that back half. You can't knock his work rate. I'd love to see what sort of distance he covered. And, I know we're going to talk about Wiedemann, and we needed someone to play the role he did, because Wiedemann was playing that markup centre half forward, so a tougher gig for sure. But he didn't have hardly any impact, Wiedemann, and hasn't for the last 3 games. So Brown was dead set unlucky to be dropped the previous week. I don't understand it at all, but we'll look forward, not back. And he would be terribly unlucky to get dropped this week, but who knows?
Well, let's talk about Wiedemann now while we're on him. Another game where he didn't have much impact. What's going on there? Felt our forward line was once again very crowded. When we talk about Brown's had 7 marks, but a lot of them were sort of up the field. What do we do with the Weed, big man? I'm not going to drop him.
After playing well, he's not getting high numbers. He's been kicking his 1 or 2 goals. He was at his best this season when he was tick-tacking with Jackson. I thought they complemented each other really well. I think we talked about that on the podcast a couple of times. But to be honest, the last 3 games have been season-defining, must-win matches. The sort of games you forge your career reputation on, and he has been a long way off what I would say is an acceptable level. He had 2 games against Sydney, 2 possessions against Sydney. He was not much better against Freo. His defensive running was poor both those games. And in this game, when he really needed to pull his finger out, it was poor again. I know he was playing with Brown doing that running. He was expected to do more of the sort of heavy lifting in the pack marking down there, which I'll grant that. But he's had 1 contested mark for the last 3 weeks. I think so. 16 possessions over those 3 games, 4 marks in total, and only 1 of them contested, and that was in this game, and I can't even recall it, to be honest. That's just not enough numbers, He's not pushing hard across. He's tackling, and damningly, sure, he's contested sort of marking his go, but he's not taking them, but it's flying. He's not laid a tackle in 3 weeks. In 3 must-win games of footy where our season's on the line. He's 24. He's not a kid. You might excuse, one of the young fellas for not laying a tackle, but surely the KPI for a big, strong 95, 96, 97 kilo forward is to crunch some tackles. So not to have laid a tackle in 3 weeks is just not on, I don't reckon.
Yeah, not much more you can say. Those stats are just damning, isn't it? And a lot of it's about the attitude, as Binman just said. To not lay tackles, even if everybody has bad periods where they just can't get the ball or they're out of form. But even when you're in that situation, you can always lay a tackle. You can always put in a block. Wiedemann's not doing that as well. At the start of the season, I thought he wouldn't make it simply because the times that I'd watched him in previous years, he gives up. When he doesn't get the mark, he gives up, and then all of a sudden this year he started to have those second efforts and put in that little bit. And in the second half of this season, he's reverted to type again. He just stops and he stands and he looks at what's going on 2, 3, 4 meters away instead of doing something. You can come in, you can bump as a big body, you can push people aside, you can get involved, but he's just not getting involved. And as a full forward primarily, that's critical. You've got to exert yourself as a full forward, and he's just not doing it. I don't see any future for him at the moment, the way he's playing.
And 4 marks in 3 games is, if he was Bruce, for instance, and those 3 games he spent the entire game inside 50, that can be pretty hard to get a mark. And sure, you'll go through games as a forward playing deep and not getting a big swag of possessions. But he's got license to push up the ground, and as there would be an expectation he does. So you should be getting your 3-4 marks a game just pushing up and being the outlet option like Brown was in this match. So 4 marks, 1 contested across 3 games, albeit 2 of them were wet. I'll give him that, but it's not on. And like I'd hate to suggest this, but I reckon for me he's looked a little bit like a player who doesn't want to get hurt before the end of the season, and maybe he's. I'm not sure, George, what's his contract position. Maybe he's got Collingwood in his dreams.
Yeah, I don't know offhand what the contract position is, but Brody Myercheck's out of contract and having troubles. I'd be doing a straight swap, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'd take a straight swap for Myercheck, and I never would have thought I'd say that. Certainly not 2 years ago, but I'm not one generally to lose faith in players, and perhaps I'm being a bit unfair, but as I said, these last 3 games have been critical games of footy for the footy club, and it's when your reputation's forged.
Wow, strong. Strong positions there from you guys. Let's move on to perhaps a bit more positive talk about a player, which is Ed Langdon. I think you've talked him up on every show we've done this year, and this week was no exception. But there were a couple of turnovers and miss kicks early on. But if there's any one piece of play that you could show to someone that typifies the way that Ed Langdon plays and highlights his hard running, then you could look no further to a play late in the last quarter with about 3 minutes to go. Lever gets the ball in the back pocket. He kicks across the ground to Langdon, who's by himself on the defensive 50. Langdon then runs hard up the ground with the ball up the wing. He delivers to Spargo, who then kicks it to Cosy on the half-forward line, on the half-forward flank, and all the while Langdon has continued to gut run up the ground. He receives the ball from Pickett, and then he kicks it to Spargo. Then he kicks it to the top of the square, and that ended up being the play that resulted in Rivers' match-winning goal. And that goal doesn't happen without Langdon's gut running, and for me, that is a winning trade move every day of the week. And in my book, it's the trade of the year throughout the AFL. Just love Ed Langdon. Do you boys agree?
Langdon was probably fundamentally the one player who, when the game needed to be won, his running won it for us to create those opportunities. But like we've spoken about in previous weeks, he's been critical. He's filled that gap that we've so desperately needed in years gone by, and he's producing what we exactly need, certainly up one side of the ground. And as we've said, Baker may well be able to do the same on the other side. But Langdon just never stops. He's the original Eveready battery kid. He's been instrumental in our turnarounds this year, and again, another fabulous recruit that the recruiting side has brought to the team.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. His running has just been incredible. I think I read that he had 10 turnovers, and if so, I reckon they're pretty harsh on the definition of a turnover, because watching the replay, I read that before watching the replay, and it didn't seem that they were horrendous turnovers, but he's often kicking under pressure, George. He's often kicking after a long run as well, and speaking of reputation forged, I put a lot of stock in players who play well in losing games, and he definitely held his head high in both the Sydney and Freo games. And he's running. The commentators were pointing it out. It was phenomenal, and I thought it was, a nice touch at the end for him to get that handball from track to clear it and to, I guess, finish off the game for us at the end. And again, from hard running and contest, and he's been a terrific recruit, as good a recruit to the club as I can recall. May and him have both been absolute stars all season, really. And again, the brilliant leadership from him as well. Running to position, tackling, taking players on, taking that boundary on. He's been a revelation for the D's.
And importantly, he's the safety get out of jail card for us a lot of times. Where he'll make that run out to the wing or down the wing to create the opportunity for players, particularly in the back line, to get it out. Again, something that we never had there last year. So he's been a fabulous addition.
Yeah, and I think that if Baker does come on, that really will help Langdon, because it means that oppositions won't be able to isolate him and take the other wing. If you've got two good wingmen in footy who can both get metres gained these days, I think that's a big weapon. Particularly if they've got a bit of a difference, one's maybe more offensive or aggressive. I think that will really help him. I know Tomlinson, the thinking was for him, but to be the wingman, but I don't know that he's quick enough to really flourish in that role.
Let's move on. We'll go quickly on the next couple of ones. I've got Lever and Smith. How did you see their games? Thought Lever was costly at times, made some horrific mistakes, a couple of drop marks and conceded a goal or two. George, how did you see Lever's game?
Yeah, I think you summed it up there. He had a couple of shockers and then had a couple of pieces of brilliance. His kicking doesn't fill me with any sort of feeling of confidence. It's almost a bit like T-Mac from years gone past when he was in the back line. But anyhow, he seems to be there, and even though he did make those mistakes, particularly in the first half, he's been around. He's got the right sort of head that he doesn't go into his shell as a result of it. He just keeps on going, which is essential in a backman, because the ball's going to keep coming in there at some stage. Smith, unfortunately, I still of the same opinion. He performed better in this game, but there were times when, in a similar way to Wiedemann, he just gives up. He just stands and looks at the ball that's 2 metres away, waiting for other people to do something. As a backman, the idea is to kill the ball, kill the opportunities for the opposition. And sometimes you just look at him standing outside and the ball gets flicked out to one of their small forwards usually. You should be in there and just throwing your body around willy-nilly to try and stop it, cause the ball up or a reset or knock it out of bounds. I don't think Smith's got the footy smarts to be able to hold down the position in the long run.
Yeah, I'd say I've been prepared to give Smith, the benefit of the doubt, and he's definitely got talent, and there's no question about that. I've said on Demonland a number of times I'd prefer to see him up forward, where I think his lack of football IQ would be less of an issue, and it's really exposed down back. I thought he was great in the last quarter. There was a clutch moment where I thought for sure he was going to give up a mark one-on-one to Cameron in the goal square, but I thought he was also a bit lucky not to have given away a couple of goals or allowed a couple of goals. So, yeah, I think the Smith experiment's probably done its dash. Lever he frustrates, doesn't he? And he does some good things. And I reckon definitely, as I said last week, he's got to get rid of the moustache. That'll help my opinion of him no end. having said with his kicking, he just isn't a good kick. He did that turnover, which it was, again, a stupid commentary from Darcy saying it was like an impossible kick. It wasn't an impossible kick. It was a total AFL standard kick that should have been low enough for the player to run onto the ball. We had two players who could have run onto it. But what I loved actually about Lever was late in the game, he did something he hasn't been doing all season. He crossed to the fat side where we had, I forget who it was, I think it might have even been Brown in the corridor, who then crossed to Viney, I think, or perhaps even Langdon down the other wing and opened it up. It's when the commentators noted that they were really flagging, and that 4-day break was a huge factor in that last quarter. They just weren't able to get across to the other side to cover that, defensively cover the fat side, and he took that kick on, which he hadn't been doing, and that I thought was terrific because it's obviously what needed to be done, and it would have been easy for him to go into his shell and just kick back down the line. So good on him for taking that kick on.
Melksham, thoughts on his new role as a tagger that they've just plucked out of nowhere? George, you'll be happy to know he had 5 tackles this week, but his opponent had about 24 possessions. I don't think he's a good enough lockdown tagger in a tagging role. Your thoughts on Melksham?
Yeah, I think that pretty well summed it up straight away. I have a feeling that the coaches are getting desperate in the sense that they put him into that role because he's been so poor in his roles up in the forward line. Any other player, I suspect, would have been dropped weeks and weeks and weeks ago. He was playing on Josh Kelly, supposedly, as a tagger who got 24 touches, and you really wouldn't have known that he was being tagged at all. I don't know what to do with Melksham. Like I said, he should have been dropped weeks ago, and tried some other people. I don't think he's a tagger. Harms hasn't been in great form at all this year, but as a tagger, Harms would know what to do, and I suspect that Kelly wouldn't have got certainly 24 possessions if he had a proper tag on him.
Yeah, I thought I'd read that he was on Taranto in the first half, but it's hard to tell. But he certainly wasn't in the second half, and they were talking about him on Kelly late in that game, and immediately after they talked about it from that clearance, he was not goal side for Kelly. He allowed Kelly to run forward to the goal, which was just a big no. That's, I think, the one that set up the shot that Daniels missed. He kicked it to Daniels, and if he'd kicked that would have been on Melksham, given Melksham's job was to stop exactly that scenario. So, yeah, I mean, he's not going to get dropped now. As you said, George, should have been dropped earlier, I think. But, I could have smashed my television when he gave up that second goal after Lever had given up a goal on the after his mistake. And to hand over that ball so easily and cough up the goal was just, I thought we had the better of that first half, but again we went into halftime with scores level. It was a bit like the Saints game, wasn't it? Where it just again it felt like we didn't get the rewards we deserved from the work we'd put in.
My favourite thing that Melksham did do was that he Toby Greened Toby Green, which was nice to see. Look, we haven't talked about Clary and Petrarca all had their good games. I think we'll move on. I loved Petrarca's goal. Was just fantastic. That pickup was one of the best pickups you're ever likely to see, and did exactly what I always call for and think we don't have enough. He had a snap kick for goal that had a lot of penetration and went through the big sticks, and we don't see enough of that.
Just one thing, Andy, I wanted to say about track, just as a statistical freak show, really. 22 possessions, 19 of which were contested. And I think his first 9 or 10 possessions were contested, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, but look, as I said, we haven't talked about him, but that doesn't mean he wasn't instrumental in the game, as well as Clary. Let's move on so we don't. My internet doesn't die completely. My last note that I've got before we move on to next week and the run home. it's fantastic to get the win. In the past, I reckon we struggled with these close games, and that's the second time in a couple of weeks that we've pulled off a close one. Credit to the boys getting back into the game once we thought we were done. But once again, we failed to stem the flow of run-on of goals. I think that they'd kicked 6 out of 7 at one stage. And we got off to a great start. When we get these great starts, you sort of want it to continue, but we had some costly turnovers. How do we stamp this out of our game? Who wants to take that? Who wants to put their hand up to take that one?
I can't, I don't think, because if anyone knows the answer to this, please send it to the football department of the Melbourne Football Club. This was round 17, and we were seeing the same thing as we've been seeing certainly all this year, the inability to stop the run of the opposition, particularly when a couple of those, that 6 of 7 goals that was around the half-time mark, I think, we gave them a couple, two were Melcham turnovers or silly decisions. There just doesn't seem to be the maturity and the leadership that we talk about across the ground to be able to go, hey guys, let's go into halftime 2 goals up. Let's not rush this. We can just kill the game for the last 2 minutes. I think I've spoken previously about the last 2 minutes of quarters where we just seem to give up goals. We need that leadership. We need Stephen May on each line at the moment to be able to stop this. I don't know. This is the coach's dilemma. How do you do it? I've got no idea.
Well, when you talk about leadership, right on almost on quarter time, we got a free kick in the middle of the ground. Max takes the ball and plays on. There was 30 seconds to go less, and he's kicked it wayward. He's kicked it to Baker, but he's kicked it straight to a GWS player. They've kicked it out to the flank, and then in turn to Toby Green, who's had a shot for goal, but on the siren, and thankfully he missed. But you don't play on then. We just kicked a goal. There's no need to play on then. If Oscar Baker was absolutely by himself and there was no one there, and perhaps Max thought he was, then yeah. But other than that, if you're going to play on, thump it straight into the forward line. Very costly.
So, George, that one was when Mumford whacked Oliver. And I think not only did he hit him in the head, I think he got him with his knees in the ribs, and he was dry retching Oliver. Yeah. The 14 seconds to go from memory. Stop the clock there, hold it. He would have been kicking from the centre half forward. He would have had an outside chance of kicking a goal, but probably too far out, obviously, to kick the goal. But Oliver, the clock would have stopped. That's the thing. Had time to reset. We'd just kicked the goal. Let Oliver get up, take time, and do a set play. That was the go there. Just with the run on in that game, I totally agree with what George is saying around leadership and the sort of. It's been a feature right through Goodwin's tenure, hasn't it? That teams have got on a run, but it didn't feel quite like that in this game. I was surprised when the commentators said 6 of 7 goals, and after that we got the next one. I think so it was 6 of 8 ultimately, but it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like they were out and out smashing us. It was more
that's because we had almost a 4-goal lead.
Well, 3 goals, but you know what I mean. Look, it didn't feel as if we'd suddenly dropped our bundles and they were rolling over the top of us. They were scoring goals, I guess. So it just didn't have that feeling. But having said that, I think my only contribution in the game day thread, I can't keep up with the game day thread on Demonland, was coming into that final quarter is that we'll learn a lot about the club. 7 points down. This is where everything really you have to forget. The hub, the travel, the poor run with the games, the no buy, all of that stuff is out the window. Let's see what the boys want, how much they want this win, and credit where it's due. They wanted it. They came out and they played for their coach, who would have been under enormous pressure if we'd lost that game. They were a tremendous will in that last quarter. So for me, that was the best thing about the game, is that 7 points down, they came out and put the bit between the teeth and decided they were going to win that game.
All right. Well, that's it for me. With my notes, there were some things you guys wanted to bring up. All right, let's just go on to we'll go on to talking about next week changes. Big man, who's coming out? We've got one last roll of the dice. We need to win this game. Who comes in?
Well, I don't know. This game of who comes in is like sort of who would I do and what would he do? As I said, there's a big disconnect, and I had to. Speaking of wry grins, I gave the Espargo wry grin when I heard a clearly grumpy Goodwin's presser before the GWS game talk about when asked about selections and who was going to come in for the GWS game. He said, "Well, they will make some changes, but not too many because they're trying to build cohesion." And that's like, right. Well, that's a funny way about building cohesion. So if they want to build cohesion now with one game of the season, you've got Jeddah probably has to come out. I think even, the injuries are cover for that. Hunt's probably going to come out. There's two there. You're going to bring Hibbard back in. He loves Harms. Harms is going to come back in. And I think Jackson's fit. I reckon he'll be keen to bring Jackson back in.
Is Jackson fit? He was still listed as 1 to 2 weeks.
Was he? So, yeah, I'm not sure.
Last week, but I don't know.
But, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he makes 3 changes, which would be 23 changes in 4 games of footy. So him and I have got different ways of defining cohesion, I think, so, or a cohesive unit. So, I think probably Hunt will go out. I think Hibbard will come back in, and I expect that Jets will go out, and hopefully Lockhart comes back in.
George, you want to progress?
Yeah, thoughts are around the same areas. I think Hibbard would be a natural in. Nev comes out because of injury, but the question is who creates the space for that small backman that we so desperately need, particularly against a Tip and Woody. We need somebody to be able to run with him. Up forward, I think Hunt's written his do not come Monday card, so I suspect he'll be the one out. Probably that would mean Hannon would come back in because simply there aren't any other true options. I can't see them bringing Bedford back just for this one game. I don't think there's any point in that. You've got to, again, another must-win game. You've got to have that bit more experience than what Bedford's got. So really, we're only looking at possibly 2, maybe 3 changes this week, of which one is an essential. But beyond that, I don't think we need to be doing anything more. And
it's instructive that Benell's not in our discussions, really, isn't it? It doesn't look like he's going to be in the frame. The other factor, it's a fascinating game because Andy, as you've suggested on Demonland, this is a game that's going to be live no matter what, isn't it, for us? So we'll be looking for a big win. So obviously they're going to be playing more aggressively, you'd expect, because they'll, that's the way you need to risk having goals scored against you to maximise your own chance of scoring goals, which should mean a corridor game of footy with attacking high press, which was what they did in this game against GWS. So, I wonder whether that will factor into their selections about the need to bring in players who can play that high press and put the score on the board.
Well, we'll sort of know on we make the changes on Friday, I believe. When's
Saturday? Yeah, that's right. Friday.
Playing Saturday, so we'll do it on Friday. I believe the St Kilda game's on Friday night, though, so we won't know. That's Friday night, so we'll have to make the changes before we know the result of that game. But the result of that game sort of could, and this is where we'll go into the permutations of making the finals. And we'll preface this by saying that Bim Man only knows scores up to half time in the Collingwood Suns game, so we're going to treat that as a live game. So in terms of St Kilda wins, we can't go ahead of them. If St Kilda loses, meaning GWS wins, we can draw level on games with St Kilda, but we still need to catch up a percentage on them. And I believe, George, do you know this? Is it 25, them 25 down, us 25 up points?
I, I haven't got to that sort of level of calculation,
There are.
and quite frankly, I wouldn't bother about it because it depends on what St Kilda do and what we do, and all we can do, the only thing that we can do is what's within our control, which is beat Essendon and beat them convincingly, and the numbers will take care of themselves. If we don't beat Essendon and we don't beat them convincingly, then we're opening ourselves up either to not making it from straight away or potentially not making it. So we can only do one thing, and hope for the other results to fall our way. Like I said, we better be barracking for Freo. Is the biggest opportunity I think we've got. We've just got to play the game.
But the point I'm making is once we play, we'll know the St Kilda results. So if St Kilda has lost, we will know exactly how much we need to win by to jump them on percentage. And if they, it might mean that we need to win by 6 goals or 5 goals to get in that way, and then we don't have to rely on the results from the Collingwood game or the results from the Bulldogs game. But if St Kilda win, they're out of the equation, and then we are relying on Collingwood losing both games, and if Collingwood lose both and we win, there's no percentage involved. We go ahead of Collingwood, but with the Bulldogs, that's it. We need to win, and the Bulldogs, if the Bulldogs lose, then we jump them. We can only do what's in our control, but I really don't like the fact that we have put ourselves in this position. We were 2 weeks ago, we were in prime position to, had we won one, we wouldn't be one of those 2 games. We wouldn't be having this discussion. We certainly wouldn't be having this. We might have been having, if we just won one, we might have been having this discussion because we still could have dropped the Essendon game and been overrun by someone else, but we wouldn't be relying on other results. And if we had won 2, then we'd be talking about whether we would overtake West Coast. But that wasn't to be. My biggest fear is if we lose to Essendon, but the other results would have gone our way to get in by beating Essendon. That's my biggest nightmare scenario. People are saying their nightmare scenario is us winning but still missing out by 1.1%. My nightmare scenario is losing, but then those results going our way where we would have gone in had we just won. So, yeah, this is the Melbourne way.
The good thing about the weekend, Andy, is the game. We play Essendon in a live game of footy, so and we've got to hope. If all the other cards don't fall away, we want them to fall. We will then win, and we'll be backing for Freo, which will be, we've been there before in terms of barracking for other teams. We go back to 87 and barracking for the Hawks to beat the Cats down at Cardinia Park as a famous example of that scenario. But the good thing for fans is that means it's no matter what, it's going to be a live game of footy on Saturday with the full energy, 2:10 on a Saturday afternoon, classic footy time, and good experience for the boys as well in terms of playing essentially another elimination final. Lots of learnings there. And I've already worked out my rationalisation if one of those nightmare scenarios happen and we don't get in for percentage or whatever, is that at least then I'm not going to have to worry through the finals about us winning a grand final and me not being able to be there. So, at the very least, that's off the table.
That's my only solace in this whole thing. I was even contemplating a couple of weeks ago, this was before the 2 weeks, whether I do the 2 weeks in Darwin. Well, I have to convince my wife first of all, but yeah, I was contemplating that, spending. I know a mate who did that, and he's gone to see a few of the games. He went up to Cairns. He went to the Gabba. He's going to the Gold Coast this week. I'm very jealous, but yeah. Yeah.
You
It's
would win
my
some award, wouldn't you, for most extreme fan?
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, at the end of the day, quite frankly, if we can't beat Essendon convincingly, when Essendon are missing Heppel, Hurley, Fantasia, Bellchambers, Hooker, Zaharakis, Laverde and McGrath, then we don't deserve to be there, and there's no use worrying about what might happen the previous week or the next day. The following week or the next day. They are severely undermanned in quality. They've got no incentive to move up the ladder in any way, shape, or form. They could possibly, if they won the game, move up maybe 2 places if other games fall their way. So they're going to be stuck where they are basically at the end of the season. No tanking allegations need to be made. But if we can't beat this mob, then we'll forget about worrying about whether we're good enough to be in finals or not. We're not even good enough to beat them.
Sorry, are you new here or something? You're not made up.
I just had a flashback, George. It's very similar to what you said before the Sydney game.
Yeah,
Going back in time, and we reset the Cairns clock.
yeah, it's the same as the Collingwood game in 2017 as well. They were equally undermanned.
No, yeah, well, not as bad. It's interesting the comments from Worsfold coming out yesterday. He's given it to the club. Whether that gives them a bit of a lift, but do they want to see Worsfold off? They already know who their coach is next season. They're in a bit of disarray, that footy club, and couldn't happen to a better bunch of players and team. I hate Essendon. Hawthorn and Essendon are my 2 most hated sides. So let's hope we thrash them no matter what happens.
We might not even get to talk about this next week because if we miss out, that's it. But we'll take 1 week at a time. But what are your thoughts on? It's likely that if everything falls our way, we go over to Perth to play the Eagles. Does that instill any fear in you, or we don't even talk about that?
1 week at a time, man.
Yeah. And we've been.
I'm talking about now because I think we might not even get to talk about it next week.
Well, we've got their bigs won't worry us. So it's just like the problem for us is that smaller and medium forwards worry us, and they've got about 6 of them. So.
Yeah, Liam Ryan will kick 8.
And speaking of Liam Ryan, speaking of other kicking, I haven't banged on about kicking this week, but he is the sweetest kick in the AFL, Liam Ryan. He's a beautiful kick, and every time I watch him play, I think, good Lord, I'd love him at Melbourne Footy Club because he's got an incredible sense of space, but he's just the sweetest kick, perfect action, and doesn't miss. Except when he does. He literally never misses except those times he does.
He's got the action that you'd want to run in slow motion and show it to kids to show them exactly how to hold, how to drop a ball and how to kick and follow through. It's just utterly perfect. He's brilliant.
Yeah. Economical. There's no moving parts. It's neat. The ball gets straight to foot, and he gets great distance off 2 or 3 steps. He's the full package.
Well, boys, I think we're going to leave it there. Let's hope that next week we're here and we're not doing a post-mortem on our 2020 season. Let's hope we've got something to cheer about. All right, just get our theme music up here. All right, thank you, Big Man. Thank you, George. And as I said, we'll be back next week. Hopefully it's not a post-mortem, and hopefully we get to celebrate. Catch you next week. Go Days.
Go Red Leg.
Go Freo.
Come on, Demons. Come on,